Okay. We are streaming live on YouTube. We got booted from Facebook to YouTube. Everybody okay with that? Does that matter to anybody? I had no choice in the matter. The planning commission had dibs. Okay, let's see. Lori, are you there? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, I am here.
FYI, I don't know how many of everyone on the call has been contact or had discussions, but Kim Holmes and Charlie Welch have had discussions in the last couple of weeks, some with the attorney's office, some of us individually or collectively. So I think funding might come up tonight. I know it's on the agenda. I'm not sure where that's going to go. It's FYI. That's largely focused, to my knowledge, on your side, Lori. Additionally, the 160D update, I'm kind of going backwards here. That's largely, I think, going to be Jill kind of talking about that for the board, not really the stuff that's going to impact our teams day to day. I don't have any hearing updates. Do you have anything, Lori?
No, we haven't had any requests for hearings.
Okay. Good deal. Let's see who's out there.
Yay, I'm glad to hear that.
That's right. Absolutely.
Me too, Karen.
You never know, though. It might be
I know.
new world we're going towards. There might be more. Could be a different board that hears them, though. Okay.
Right.
I don't have anything for under projects for tree ordinance guidelines and development, other than we have multiple things we're working on that we expect to bring to the board very soon. For TCAP Plan B, I'm just going to revisit the link and kind of go back over that. It's the TCAP report and accompanying documents are published online. Tree canopy preservation policy is, there's been interest from Kim and Charlie and others about pushing from a board perspective and supporting heritage tree and kind of more stringent tree preservation policy. And in general, I've had conversations with Charlie and Kim recently about the board stepping up and really having a much more active role in advising. So that could create more work for all of us. That's kind of what I have in mind for some of these agenda items. I just want to make sure staff had an idea before we jumped on it. Any questions, thoughts of that? Concerns?
So the tree canopy funding, you have that on old business. Is that something that happened recently, or?
No, I don't know. I don't know why Natasha put it there.
Okay.
To be honest, I'm not sure. That should be.
Oh, that's okay. No,
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. Okay, that I just
I'm not
wasn't sure
sure
if I
either.
missed something. That's all.
No. Well, I've had a conversation.
And is that
with
something
both.
you need me to just?
I think it's going to touch on mostly your world. I will say that I've had a conversation with both Kim and Charlie recently offline. They mentioned they'd spoken to, I think you or Karen or both of you, and we briefly talked about additional staffing needs that might be related to UDO regulations, but I think it's mostly going to be over in the maintenance kind of program world. So I think it mostly will be on your side of the tree canopy world. Does that make sense?
Okay, and this is something that will be brought up by Kim or Charlie, or is this something I need to have prepared to speak about?
No, it's their item. All this stuff is really their item. Sorry.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
We should have chatted before.
That's fine.
That's my fault. No. I should have been organized. But yeah, sorry. Let me see if Natasha's there. Yep, there she is. Hey, Natasha. I don't know where that's going to go, Lori, to be honest. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I don't know if it'll be quick or long, or I'm guessing you may have to kind of provide some information for that.
Yeah, that's fine. No problem.
All right, we good to go, everybody? Okay. I'm gonna let them in. Here they come. I think we got everybody.
Hello, hello.
Good evening, everybody.
Hey, Tim.
Hello.
Oh, so
Everyone's-
nice to see everybody. Hello.
A lot of people joining at once here. Apologies for the waiting room, but just making sure our YouTube connection is working and kind of just going over some things with my colleagues. We're on YouTube tonight, everybody. We're not on Facebook anymore, so just FYI. Not sure it matters to anybody, but public meeting laws, we have to be streamed right now, so that's where we're at. We will be recording starting any second now. Give me about 10 seconds to make sure I know what I'm doing here. Okay. Okay, Kim, I'm ready if you are.
All right, shall we call the meeting to order and take roll call?
That sounds good to me.
All right. Make a move that we open the call to order.
I'll second that if you need a second. I don't know.
I think we're good. I think Natasha can
Yeah,
just do the roll call.
yep, absolutely. I will call each person by last name, and if you'll just answer if you're here, and then I can check you off. So from the top, Banks,
Here.
Davis.
Here.
All right. Gagne,
Here.
Hart. Sarah Hart. Okay, Holmes,
Here,
Negrin.
Here.
Massa. Steve Massa. McGowan.
Here.
Roberts
Here.
and Welch.
Here.
Hey, I think that's everyone.
all right.
Natasha, I see Mr. Massa and Ms. Hart on the participant list. I just don't know if,
So Steve, I think he said he potentially might have some connectivity issues tonight,
Okay.
but he would try
Okay.
to join us as much as he can, or if he could.
okay,
And I don't know about Sarah Hart.
you can see him. I heard somebody say you could see him.
Steve
Okay.
Massa, you can see his picture up.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
There he is. I see him. We can't hear you, Steve. I can't unmute you. I'm trying.
Sarah Hart's showing up as well, but I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I see her too.
Let's see if I
Can
can.
you hear me now?
Yes, now we can
I
hear
hear you.
you.
Great. Thank you,
Okay.
Steve.
Sarah. Don't know.
Sarah, let us know you're out there.
Okay, well, we will move forward. We have some minutes, folks, going back a couple months, so I ask you to dig back in your memory bank. Can everyone see that Word document?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to slowly scroll through it. Natasha also sent this out to the board earlier. Please voice or put it in the chat any questions, concerns, mistakes, any feedback.
I had a question that during the May meeting, I had made some commentary regarding the development in the Steel Creek area. Is that something that does not get included in the minutes?
Natasha, I know we recently discussed minutes, minute taking requirements and format. I don't know if that's something, that level of detail that Mr. Mouse is asking about, is that something that's not required or covered in minutes based on what we agreed to kind of the formatting? Does that make sense, Natasha?
Yeah, it does. It makes sense. And what I did was, Steve, actually, as a result of your question, what you were asking about, I actually touched base with our attorney, Jill Sanchez Myers, to see if I could get some more input on the proper way to create good minutes for the commission. And she gave us some really good feedback about really needing to not go too much in depth. You really could do sort of a basic accounting, and then that would be good enough.
It would not be different from my experience as a director of my HOA, where certain elements of discussion were not deemed necessary to be included in the minutes. So I understand. That makes sense. So I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the minutes for this meeting.
And that was for the May meeting.
For the
just
May.
to clarify. Yep.
Can we make a consolidated motion to adopt the minutes from the next month as well?
I believe that's, yes, I believe you can do that. Let me just make sure I get them up here. Okay, so it's my understanding that there's a second motion to consolidate and approve both minutes at the same time. So we just need a second for that.
I will second that. Okay.
Okay. Everybody's got to vote. Kim,
We need to take roll, okay.
Yeah.
Is that Natasha taking roll call again or a vote call?
I'll go
Yes.
ahead and
Can we move just to a voice vote or a hand vote?
Natasha, do you know the answer to that?
my understanding is that we can go through and do the roll.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, Banks, Davis,
Yay.
Gagne,
Yay.
Hart,
Yay.
Holmes,
Yay.
Negrin,
Yay.
Massa,
Yay.
McGowan,
Approved.
Roberts,
Yay.
and Welch.
Approved.
Motion carries.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. So we have some new agenda items tonight, and we're going to skip down from new business into old business. I think some of these items were put in old business or project areas because there has been some discussion offline or in the past by the board. But it's my understanding there's some things that are going to be brought back up anew. so to speak, tonight or going forward. So that's why they're kind of placed in the, not in the new business section. First up is hearing updates. There are no current hearings out there that are pending. So no quasi judicial hearing type role on the horizon right now for the board. Unless there's any other discussions or comment on that, I'll move right along to the 160D update.
Yes, I think.
Okay. Okay. So 160D update, I believe Jill had sent out some information to the board. Jill, I didn't know if we wanted to go over that or have a moment here where the board can just ask questions. Would that make sense to you? For maybe just field any questions?
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, I'm having a hard time hearing a little bit, but yeah, I didn't really plan to present anything. Everything was really just kind of briefly explained in the memo. But really, I'm here if you have any questions for me. As I explained, the changes, they don't really affect the regular meetings of the board. The changes I highlighted really only pertain to any potential hearings and quasi-judicial procedures. And a lot of what is quote unquote new is really just codifying practices that are already in place or things that are already required through case law, due process requirements. But I'm here if anyone has any questions about those, please, feel free to, raise those.
I don't have any questions. Does anybody?
I've got a question. This is Sarah Gagne. I was just wondering, is the change to the variants, it sounded like variants are going to be brought directly to CTAC rather than the chief urban forester, for example. Is that a major change? Should we expect those things to start happening regularly, or is that a minor thing?
So I would say that's probably the biggest change in process. I don't know how often y'all could expect that to actually happen in practice. I would kind of have to defer to Tim and staff on how often, how many requests for variances there actually, might be. But that's the one that I did try to highlight the most, and that, I will provide any additional training before one of those, arises, because some of those standards are a little bit different than the previous standard. So yes, that is probably the biggest change for the board.
And to add some more to that, and Lori might be able to add some more from her perspective, responsibilities of the tree ordinances. I don't expect initial significant kind of increases in variance requests or any types of hearings related to that. I think possibly when the UDO is adopted and implemented, that could, in combination with this change, the part of the goal of the UDO is to build in as much clear requirements, flexibility, and limit the amount of, I guess, staff authority that my position, Henry's position, Lori's position would have. So I think there could be in the future when the UDO is out. But right now, I don't expect a significant increase at all initially for variances.
Okay,
Lori,
thank you very much for the context.
Sure. Lori, did you have any thoughts on that?
No, I definitely agree with you, and that I think as of right now, I don't think that'll be much of a change.
There's also a little bit, kind of wrapping up the 160D, there's a little bit of impact to staff day to day. I don't think it's significant. We'll have to present credentials when we do field inspections, kind of definitively and clearly, and that would be something like making sure this badge is very visible on site. Related to hearings, we're going to have some signs made up. And there may be a component in a process for hearings. Once we get to a point down the road in the process that staff will have to put signs in the yards or the site location for any hearing. Similar to how rezonings are, we're not going to have those big old street signs that rezonings have. We're going to have more of the standard kind of historic district zoning board of adjustment signs. These kind of signs you just pop in the ground with your foot that are printed on. I'm not sure what type of material. It's like plastic, cardboard type thing, but it have tree commission hearing, something like that. Case number 2021-001, something like that. But not a huge impact, but just a little bit of extra context there. So unless there's any additional questions on 160D, we can move on. Okay. So tree canopy funding. This is a good example of an agenda where there's items from both staff and the board. So Kim, this is my understanding that this is an item from the board side.
Yeah.
Not sure how you want to move on with this one.
Well, let me can I give a little background and then?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think, like I said, kind of backing it up a little bit and then coming specifically to this was just that I feel like the members of the board we have right now are really engaged, proactive, and are feeling the pressures of time and what we're seeing in the tree canopy loss. And my thoughts or aspirations, I suppose, would be, let us really step up our recommendations to, I understand, I guess it goes to the city manager. Any recommendations we would be making either to the mayor or to the board, it would go via that route. But anyway, is to have what I would propose is that each member, and maybe we could do that tonight very briefly. I mean, just kind of go around the table. It doesn't have to be any, and hit the highlights of the topics of areas either of expertise or experience or just their perspective of what we feel may be most effective in preserving our tree canopy, because I think we're all seeing this mass loss everywhere we look in various locations of town, et cetera. So anyway, one of the first topics that had come up was, funding for the city trees for staff so that you can monitor and maintain and like say, be able to show your badge out there if you need to, as far as, whatever the situation. So I know Charlie, that was one of his perspectives. And I think that he, I don't want to put him in an awkward place, but I think he's willing to share a basic outline talking about tree canopy funding. And what I'm thinking is if we could each, kind of digressing a little bit, so stop me if I'm going off track, but talking about after we talk about the funding, like I said, if we go around and think about what each member may want to present for the next time so that each of our meetings can be efficient in discussing and voting and making these recommendations. And what I was going to say is the aspiration would be to make a recommendation that could come out of each meeting that may be too aspirational. I don't know, perhaps every other meeting. But I think time is of the essence. If we'll all, I think we would agree. But anyway, so Charlie, are you willing to give us a little background on talking about our recommendation for increased funding?
Sure, Kim, I'd be glad to.
Great, thank you.
And we got some of these numbers from Tim and Laurie, and I think the first thing I'd say, and I think we touched on this last month, was we're all of us on the board, we're trying to figure out how we can do more, how we can be more impactful. And that's in helping Tim and Laurie and everybody doing their jobs. And one of the things that I noticed was that their funding is just woefully inadequate. I mean, it just doesn't allow Tim and Laurie and the whole department to effectively do their job. So it's not a matter of so I'm gonna give you a couple of numbers. It's not a matter of saying Tim and Laurie aren't doing their jobs. They're just not giving enough money. And when Karen mentioned that we could appeal to the city manager, as Kim said, I think we all thought that was a good idea, and I do too. We'll see where it goes, but at least alert them that something needs to be done. And so I've got a few numbers I'll share with you. And if you want to write, it's probably 4 numbers. If you want to write them down, it may be a little bit easier, but I'll repeat them. First of all, and I went through the fiscal 22 budget. And as I understand it, there are 2 line items that are kind of actionable, if you will. And in other words, not including salaries and depreciation, recurring expenses and all that. I think there's 2 for us to focus on. And at some point, Tim and Laurie can come in and correct me on anything that I'm wrong. But there are 2 items. One is tree maintenance and removal. And it's $1,625,000 per year. And it has been $1,625,000 for several years and is forecast to be the same in the future. So it's a static amount. The second amount is tree planting, which is budgeted at $900,000. And I think similarly, it's been that for years and is forecast to be that. And I think we have pretty good comp data to support how inadequate the $1,625,000 is. And that really came from Tim and Laurie. And there's an independent study done. Tim may have sent that around last month. I think we certainly can do that. That compared comparable cities to their I guess it's called per capita, per tree funding. And Charlotte ranks in the bottom decile, the bottom 10%, or as I would say, just last. I don't know how many cities were included, but the $1,625,000 is kind of hard to put that in perspective, but it's $8 per tree. And sometimes $8 per tree is kind of tough as well to figure out for maintenance. But if you think about a 50-year-old tree, that's I think $500 if you accrue $8 a year for 50 years. I mean, I don't know that there's an arborist that would prune a 50-year-old tree for $500, right? So the average is $80 per tree. So that's kind of one. I think we've got good data to support that. Maybe the other part of that is we are having so many trees die during storms and old age that the vast majority of the maintenance budget really goes to tree removal. And I think vast majority is 90 to 100%. Laurie and Tim can correct me, but I think over the past few years, that's really all the city's been able to do. So there's a pretty clear argument that the $1,625,000 is way too low, below our peers, and should be much higher. And really, if we're not maintaining and preserving trees, there's a not insignificant liability component to that as well. So I think it's something that should get some urgent attention from folks. The second one, and I'll pause for a second. The second one is tree planting. That's $900,000, and I don't know that we have really good information from other cities. It'd be great if we do. In the peer comparison that Natasha sent around yesterday or recently, it mentioned in Washington, D.C., they planted 8,000 trees. And Laura, you can comment. I don't know how many trees we plant, but I was just doing rough math. If they spend $500 a tree to plant 8,000, that's $4 million for our 900,000. I'd love to get better comp data than that, but I think we all know that our tree canopy percentage has declined from whatever it was, 48 to 45 when last measured, and I'm sure it's lower today. So certainly there's justification for planting more trees given the time it takes to plant them. But I think while we've got good comp numbers on the maintenance, I think we could probably use some better numbers on planting. And I think I said this, but those are the 2 numbers. It doesn't include staffing and all that. It's just the amount of dollars the city budgets for those 2. And so my thought that I kind of floated last month and talked to Kim about was to write the city manager and say, here's the facts. This needs, what can we do to address this? not wait until fiscal 23's budget, but even sooner to develop a game plan, to both maintain and preserve as well as plant new trees. So I may have left something out, but I'll stop with that. Kim, first of all, I'll ask you if I left something out. Please add in.
I didn't believe so. And when you, only thing I'll just mention, you said 4 numbers. Now, were you saying you were referring to kind of existing tree maintenance and tree planting? And I'm taking those as the 2 numbers, and the other 2 numbers were in comparison. Is that correct?
Yeah, the $82 per tree average
Okay.
in that study. And then Charlotte's average is $10 per tree. Again, it's hard to do this on video.
Right.
People don't have numbers in front of them, but
Right. No. Absolutely.
I think we can make a pretty clear case. It's almost embarrassingly low on those 2. But yes, those were the 4.
Right.
I was thinking about it. And the last comment I'd make is, I've talked to various parts of the city who will say, yes, trees are important, but we've got to do more. We need to do more. It's a great asset, blah, blah, blah. But, are you going to increase funding? Well, no, we can't do anything about it. And right away is only a small part of the tree canopy. And that's true. But I think one thing to keep in mind is the right of way is median, and everyone knows median during the middle of the street if there is one, and then it's between the sidewalk and the city. But if you think about most house placement and the room for trees, there's occasionally a room for tree in the front, and there's occasionally room for tree in the back, but you're not going to get too close to a house footprint. So the right of way, while it may be 7% or 10% of the area, it is a much higher percentage of the plantable area or of the potential canopy, if you will. So this is really what the city can do is very impactful. We got another issue, which is private property and all that, but that's for another day. At least for today, the city can have a really meaningful impact, and to be honest with you, for not a whole lot more money, towards our canopy.
And I think a really good point that can be taken across several, and please, any other members, please speak up. But is that the fact that these figures are static? It seems like maybe we need to tie it in. It's just like, of course, my thing is paying in lieu of, and I think they need to be tied into property tax values, et cetera. And it seems like that would be an easy, then we don't have to keep revisiting this and looking at, old numbers that make no sense. So I think not only for the city staff, but maybe is it tied into population, any number of things that would make more sense for keeping up with the budget. So yeah, that's my 2 cents worth there.
Thank you for Tim or whomever for putting that slide up with those numbers up. That's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. That analysis was completed as part of the Urban Forest Master Plan, which was adopted in 2017. So some of the numbers in that graph are slightly off from what Charlie said, just based on, the time period from 17. The data is probably from 16. So, there's a little bit of a gap there, but the trends, the realities are probably a little bit, they're the same, but they're probably a little bit bigger gaps if you catch my drift.
Yeah, that is quite a difference. Charlotte 0.07% and national average 0.52%. Wow. Yeah, so I think what would, the next step would be, do we write up a proposal? I don't know, with some of these absolute figures in there, and then at the next meeting we all vote as a board and compose our letter or bullet points and send it on to the city manager. Does that sound like a plan? Does anybody have any comments? Is that something you'd be willing to do, Charlie? Is just put it in writing, we pass it around and.
Yes, I was going to let others speak. Obviously, I didn't want to.
Right.
Yes, I'd be obviously given my comments. I would be supportive of doing that. I think that'd be a very good idea.
Can I ask Tim, those numbers? When you're comparing other cities, are you comparing like the age of the tree population? So, if they've got a bunch of young trees and our trees are older, that's going to affect how much maintenance they need, and the land distribution, the density of the land on which the trees sit. So there's a bunch of other factors that would go in to those costs, it would seem to me.
Yeah, and it's been a while since I was really plugged into this data, but we do have the reference data and like the hard data behind these, summary charts here that we could send out to you. I think it's a good point. We have the aging canopy crisis, that's largely large mature trees, so I don't know how bad storms were recently as far as how many trees fell. And Lori, how much work your team's been doing. I'm sure you've been pretty busy recently. And
I would say, if we're comparing, if I can just interject, talking about the numbers, if you're talking about the 0.07% versus the 0.52% on average, even if that were comparing to cities that are desert and you're only working with palm trees, it seems like you would be widening that gap, even if you took into account cities with younger or smaller trees versus Charlotte with older trees. Do you see what I mean? It seems that you would need even a higher percentage. So it seems like it even widens that gap all the more in our deficiency, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. And Lori probably can speak to this as well, is that we have consistently been in a place as far as maintaining and managing trees of just trying to do the most absolute urgent kind of, reactive work that we have to do. The master plan, we have aspirations to, and it's adopted city council policy to be proactive, to have higher level maintenance programming for newly planted trees. Like newly planted trees shouldn't just be planted and forgotten about till they get big enough to be a problem. Just like people, the more you take care of tree over its lifespan, the healthier it's going to be, the more benefits that tree is going to provide. So in my mind, when I think about maintenance, we're often talking about the reactive kind of like, we don't have enough money to maintain these large trees. Well, that's certainly the most concerning, highest profile area, but there's also significant needs in the other maintenance areas, small tree pruning. There could be more staff. I also wanted to add that, and I'll bring this on the screen as an example. So City Council adopted the 2040 Charlotte Comprehensive Plan, Charlotte Future Comprehensive Plan. And I'll point your attention to Goal 7. That's the natural and built environment. Hopefully you can see it on my screen right now. Goal 7, integrated natural and built environments. And this is a policy, it's a public investment goal. It's part of high level policy. And I've highlighted, there's multiple items in this plan about funding for tree management, not just kind of your tried and true basic remove trees, maintain trees. That's the biggest area of need, I would say, but there's a lot of big areas. And Lori, I don't know if you have any comments on that as well.
Yes. Yeah. So, and if you look down at 7.11, it talks about a proactive tree care program. And that is something that we are very interested in working towards. And, as everyone that lives in the city of Charlotte knows, when we do have storms, it's our larger, older trees that do have, that tend to come down in these storms. And so, we want to get to a place that the trees that we're planting, we can grow them up properly so that we are reducing issues in the future.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, great point. I was going to skip over that, but the big point is like there's high level adopted council policy now in both this comprehensive plan and the urban forest master plan that say, hey, we need to do all these things, not just, the kind of flashy tree planting, preservation programming, things like that. We need the kind of core maintenance funding. And so there's, and Charlie, to the work you and Kim are talking about the board doing, this is probably helpful, I would think, for any type of, advisory memo or something you send up the chain, is like there's you know, you guys aren't just making this up out of the blue. There's council adopted policy in place to support that.
Tim,
And I see that Kay has Kay, I saw your hand up there. Sorry, it took me a minute.
so I have a question, and this might not be the right wheelhouse, but I'm just thinking, normally when we see numbers like this where there's a lack of funding, or we may feel that there isn't an adequate amount of funding, but the city's saying that's what they want, would the presentation that we could possibly put together be something that someone from this board would need to present and get on the docket for a city council meeting? Because I'm trying to figure out how would we be able to help influence the amount of money that's actually going to be allocated to the trees if we're saying like, hey, we want to show you this information, like we're not spending enough to reach this goal. So it's great that this goal is stated, but like, what's the real action plan behind it? And if we've previously had a considerably less amount of money given, right, for the trees, and we're spending a really, really large amount on, you know, just the trees that are damaged from the storms, I'm really trying to understand, like, how are we going to move or inspire them to really consider like our point of view? Because it seems like all we kind of get the opportunity is to, you know, just kind of let them know, hey, this is what we're thinking, but we're not able to kind of push them to give us the money. And that pushes someone like myself to have to be a part of a private sector like Tree Charlotte to help raise money in the private sector to kind of fill in the gap of what the city is not providing. So I'm just trying to understand, like, what avenues do we truly have to advocate for the money we need?
Good question. And the advisory role is certainly part of this board. You know, it's in the name. So Jill, I don't know if that's something that I'm going to say the attorney's office can advise better on what the protocol and process is to advise leadership.
Hi. Oh, sorry, Karen, were you about to jump in? And I just got a tornado warning on my phone, and just FYI.
Oh boy, please be careful.
No, yeah, be careful. Wait a minute. Jill, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm sure you've got the answer to this question. I was just being available in case y'all wanted me to answer, but go right ahead.
So, you know, according to the ordinance, you know, CTAC has the ability to make recommendations to the city manager. And that's really the extent of the sort of the reach. That's where the recommendations should go to the city manager or his authorized representative. And then it would be up to the city manager, my understanding would be to, you know, take that further in that regard. So I don't really have a lot more to add to that. That's really what the city ordinances state, but Karen might be able to add something from a historical or practical perspective.
Can I?
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I think that's kind of the question that keeps coming up. I think Kay brings up a really good point. It's like, in order to truly have an effect and again, feeling kind of the time pressure, seeing all the loss, is, you know, it does seem that going to city council, but should that has to be done, I suppose, as either a private individual or a private group. And is that more effective than what we can do with CTAC? And not to, it seems that mostly the CTAC is the judiciary component. And like say, we can make these suggestions, but as far as really having some teeth and some action, that's where the question, I think, keeps coming up. Correct?
I think, Kim, that the board should probably find, with Jill's guidance and the attorney's office guidance, a format, whether it's a memo, whether, I'm not sure how that would work, but and it's been a long time since the board's really done this. You know, I recall it's been many, many years since the board was motivated to have an advisory role that really was communicating up the chain of command, so to speak. So I mean, I would suggest, I'm not sure if it's an official memo, I'm not sure how that works, but some type of formal statement that advises, and based on whatever case and business case the board comes up with, whatever data you base it off of, if you use that council policy, I'm not sure, but I can talk to my leadership. And I will, I update them and say, like, the tree commission is interested in doing this. Here are their interest areas. But my view is the board really needs to take that initiative to find that right method. And
Right.
As Jill just said, it's up to the manager. So let's
Right. Okay.
find
And
the
we
right way to do that. Yeah.
we did discuss kind of, what the official means were. So I guess we just need to make a statement, and I don't know, and this is probably getting ahead of ourselves, and then does the city manager have any, I don't want to say any obligation or timeline as to when they would respond to us, or is that just something that goes to the desk and they may respond or they may not? There's not any set time scale. In other words, if we make a suggestion, that we'll get some response, by the next meeting or within 2 meetings or whatever.
I'm not certain. Like I said, it's been a long time since we had a motivated board. So I'm
You just have to go.
interested and excited, and I'm also uncertain. And Scott, I saw your hand up there, so I want to make sure we
Yeah, but thank you, Tim. By the way, I love if we're able to do this where we can send a message to the city manager that we think we need more funding for those departments. I love that as a concept. I was just curious, what is the normal process for the departments in the city of Charlotte to increase their budget? I mean, obviously, we want to make that recommendation. We think it's needed, and I think anybody thinks it's needed. But what is the normal steps to go about that increasing the budget for specific departments?
So generally, it varies by department. Certainly, if there's a enterprise, revenue generating Charlotte Water, stormwater type thing, very different. But in general, there's an annual budget process that starts now for the next fiscal year. Our fiscal year runs July 1st to June 30th. And each department assesses needs and develops a list of priorities, and internally that's prioritized. And then department leadership submits the request for those needs to city's budget, strategy and budget financial folks. And it's kind of sorted out at that higher level, and it goes into the city manager's budget at some point, and he proposes that to council. So that's kind of the traditional, there's no outside impacts, internal method, but along the way, there's definitely influences that will, determine how certain things make their way into there. So if there's a strong push for affordable housing funding, well, that's a kind of external thing and internal thing. That's going to certainly dictate to some level budget numbers. But the kind of traditional general way is that department divisions kind of develop it, and it goes up this chain of command, prioritized. So each department might have 20 things, and the top 2 maybe get through, something like that, and then things are chosen.
So those numbers that were shared earlier, those are accurate. Those are the most current, up-to-date budget numbers. That 1,625 and that 900,000, pretty close. And those are static at this point. There is not a mechanism in place to incrementally increase that, or?
Well, I mean, Lori can give the definitive answer on if they're static or not, because those are both the general services, landscape management world. I can tell you without any doubt that when I was city arborist, and I'm sure it happened with Lori, there's annual requests from that group for additional funding, because it's very easy to make a business case. And Lori, please add any context or comments to that.
Yeah, definitely. So that is correct. Those numbers have been static for a few years, and we have annually made requests using data on what we spend, and using that comparison that's currently up on the chart. to request more funding.
Gotcha. So they've heard this case before, but now they might get a chance to hear it from CTAC, right? Which might amplify the need. I did just, I'm sorry, I did just think something that 900,000, again, if that's the tree planting, that is like, just from my experience, right? The budget of, let's say, 5 single family home builders, right? That's the amount that they'll end up spending on those landscapes. Are we really counting on that development and kind of the what we put together through the UDO to really to get that extra planting in, but then don't have the resources or the budget to maintain it long term?
I think so. A couple things about the numbers that Charlie provided. By and large, they go to maintenance and planting, but they're divvied up a little bit, but it all goes to, primarily maintenance and planting. On the UDO side, the regulatory side, mitigation or payment in lieu dollars are collected and they're intended to be applied towards specific uses, preservation or planting. The tree save payment in lieu money, that's intended to be kind of the significant funding source for the TCPP program. I would say that the street tree mitigation funding is really, it's intended to support tree planting, but it's not intended, from my perspective, to be the stopgap. It's not intended to be the way to get extra funding to plant more trees. It's an asset kind of recovery situation. City assets, city trees are being destroyed, and we're covering the valley for that. And it goes back into the the use it kind of came out of is tree planting. But we should not, and we're not, depend on that or look at that as revenue for tree planting support in the future. It's gravy in my mind. And if we come up with additional mitigation and payment in lieu streams, okay, let's use those for additional uses in intent. But like the comprehensive plan items we just showed a minute ago, the TCAP report as well said, like, these in lieu dollars should not be used in lieu of general fund dollars to support maintenance and planting.
Can you remind us what is the current payment in lieu now for the tree save?
It's a formula that's based on 3 variables. There's the acreage of a development site. It's based on the appraised value of the land of that site, the county appraised, not market appraisal, but county appraised tax value, just the land, not any improvements on it. So if there's a house on there or a building, that doesn't go into the variable. The third variable is the ordinance set multiplier, which the majority of the time is 15%. So you multiply those 3 variables and you get the fee you have to spend, or the development customer has to spend. However, there's a cap in place. And if your appraised tax value for land per acre is greater than $80,100 per acre, which most developing properties way above that in Charlotte right now, you hit that cap. So the cap would be whatever your site acreage is times your land value times 15% equals the fee. And there's a cap at 80,100 for that multiplier. And that cap is based on, I think, 2003 level county appraisal data. So it's very, very deep.
So is there anything in the TCAP that's going to change that and make it, like I say, again,
Yes.
an example of another static number, right? To tie it into whatever the current year is, tax value, or
that was
cap?
Yeah, that was a very important TCAP recommendation, is to update the payment in lieu it's confusing because there's a lot that goes into it. If people don't use it day by day, it can be, unfamiliar, but update that capped value to current assessed tax values for land. So yeah, I'm not sure when the last reval was. I know they're always controversial. I think it was
5 years?
15.
Oh,
14. I'm not sure.
yeah, I think so.
Yes, yeah, that was part of TCAP. It's part of the comprehensive plan. It's technically not a development requirement. It's related to a development requirement. Henry's team does this every day, all day. They're working with development customers to ensure that if they're doing payment in lieu, they pay the right amount. It's technically part of a tree ordinance guideline that has to be updated. Part of the UDO process. When I presented to the UDO's Ordinance Advisory Committee in May, that was one of the items. I took a moment and I just put it out there. 80,100 is going to increase based on the current appraisal value to $196,000 and change. And if you think about property values in Charlotte and how they've increased since 2003 to today, it makes sense. Again, this isn't market value stuff. This is tax appraised value. So it has no connection to what a property's market value might be. If there wasn't a cap there, there'd be $1 million fees paid by development costs. Well, no one would pay it, but that's what the fee would be. So that cap's in there to kind of bring it down to a reasonable level.
It still seems like it'd be, yeah, okay. And so it's currently, it is suggested currently, but does not exist currently. The suggestion is a cap of 196,000 per acre. But I guess my only thing is, does another 20 years go by where you have that this again stays static versus tying it, that cap number also into the tax value?
Well, so we have already set up a process in our financial system. So city leadership has the final approval of this, but we've set up a process in the city's financial system as a user fee for the land development permitting world, that every year those user fees get reviewed and updated. Sometimes they change, sometimes they don't. That would be part of that process every year. And that number wouldn't change. In a perfect world, it wouldn't change unless there was a new reval done, countywide reval. Does everyone know what I mean when I say reval, tax reval? So anytime there's a revaluation, the subsequent year, that payment in lieu cap should go up if we're taking the approach that TCAP and the comprehensive plan is kind of mandated, is to update that formula consistently.
Okay, and that
would go for the same for the other mitigation and payment in lieu streams. There's two other mitigation streams in addition to that one.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you. So is it just in terms of efficiency and getting things done, does it sound reasonable that right now we would take time just to go kind of through the roll and ask? And again, if you don't have any comments, fine, we can pass. But if you want to contribute to the list that we want to address in future meetings, and again, like say, we'll put the pressure on Charlie for our next meeting for that, perhaps we can go ahead and vote on a statement that we want to send to the city manager regarding the funding. And then, one other thing, because these are public meetings, we've been advised that any communications, let's say, talking about the funding, go through Natasha, and then Natasha will distribute to each of us. Is that correct, Natasha? Versus either I or Charlie or whomever's topic we're working on directly communicating with everyone. But I was just thinking for the next meeting, so that maybe we could kind of vote on the next thing after the funding recommendation, what we might want to address. Does that make sense? If we can get input from each and every board member.
Could we get whatever you're going to propose, whatever we're going to write up, could we get it maybe a week ahead of the meeting so that we have time to read it?
Exactly. That's what I was saying. We could, yes. So send it to Natasha, and then Natasha will distribute it to us. That's my understanding, correct? So that we can have our questions and research and whatever. Is that fair? I don't want to volunteer, Natasha.
So let me just recap, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Okay.
You're setting an objective for the board to submit ideas, support, feedback on the funding issue. And that'll be distributed to the board. And Kim, would the board, review that the next meeting, or are you thinking of reviewing this offline?
Well, I think if we can get as much detail prior to, then hopefully address any questions kind of back and forth in that regard. And then at the meeting, actually vote, hey, do we like this statement? Yes or no? I mean, is a majority agree and we send this forward, and then on to our next topic, onto our next concern that we wanted to make a recommendation regarding. And
And you would draft that statement at the next meeting?
Correct. I will say that again. I mean, I'm thinking we get the topics this time. Let's say, for instance, one of my perspectives would be this payment in lieu, that it should be, tied in with the reval, and that we hear about that. So, and whoever, somebody else has other thoughts. Does that make sense? That I was trying to get that list this time so that we can start thinking on those things and people can start doing their research presentation. And then we can also, in that next meeting, not only vote on whether we want to go ahead and send a statement forward regarding the funding, but then also what our next priority will be to discuss and present as a recommendation to the city manager regarding trees.
So Natasha can certainly compile the feedback.
Okay.
Staff, you guys got to write the statements. That's not staff's role.
Right.
That's
No.
the board.
No, we'll
Yeah.
absolutely. No, absolutely.
Okay. I just want to be clear, it's been a while since the board's done anything like this. So I just wanna make sure.
Actually, yeah, no. And I don't have any problem I guess that was the question. Can we, whoever, let's say myself or Charlie right now in this funding situation, communicate directly with the board members so that we can have these discussions back and forth? But we've been advised, because it is a public forum, that we cannot do that, and that it has to go through Natasha, and then Natasha has to send it to each person individually. If that's incorrect, that is fine. That's the only reason we would, but yes, we were formulating the statements and recommendations and et cetera. Does that make sense?
Jill, is there any clarity on that?
Sure, no. And if someone else on the board wanted to compile the information, so if board members are individually sending to board member A, these are my ideas. This is what I would like to present at the next meeting. And everyone is individually doing that. I don't see any issue there. The concern that we have to watch out for is, an email to all board members and then starting to reply all, or engaging in conversations, because then, we don't want to cross over into conducting an illegal public meeting. If a majority of board members are communicating simultaneous communication or near simultaneous communication through email, we want to make sure that the bulk of the discussion, the deliberation is occurring, in a public meeting where the public's been noticed. So that's really the caution there. There's no prohibition on, one-on-one conversations, but just really that reply all is the caution as far as email communication.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Or
yes.
Okay, so for clarification then, I can take the first draft of a letter, which I agree it's our role, and send it to Kim, and Kim and I can make sure we're in agreement with what we, as chairperson, right? To make sure Kim is in agreement with the way the letter should be written. And then prior to next month's board meeting, Natasha can distribute it to the entire board and we can discuss it at next month's board meeting. Does that work?
That works for me, but I don't know.
Legally, I mean,
yeah.
Again, we'll do
Yeah.
it. I think that's what we understood
Mhm.
from what Jill, you just said, and what you and Karen had said. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of what, because we want to do what's proper here.
Yes.
But-
No,
but-
that sounds
Okay.
Fine.
So Jill, I have a follow-up question. This is Kay. So let's say this plan A doesn't work. We make this really nice presentation. We get it to the city manager. The city manager, reviews it and says, hey, this is just not something I'm going to be able to help you guys with as far as increasing the funding. Can we not, as individual citizens, make our own presentation, get on the docket, and then that way it ensures that every city council member sees our presentation and the thoughts, and then also the mayor? Because I'm thinking if we send it to the manager, is he actually sharing that with the mayor and city council? Because I've noticed a lot of times when there's certain situations where people want additional funding for whatever the case may be, normally you really have to get in front of city council and kind of let them grill you on the information you're sharing to really be like a squeaky wheel, so that way you can get the attention that you want, to possibly even get it on their minds, right? Because we've got to sell this to them that, hey, we really need this money, and then they're going to ask us, well, where's this money going to come from? Because I could see that being the first thing they say, especially right now they're thinking about the budgets. It's really kind of like, I wish this conversation would have been had earlier, because then we could have been more prepared if we needed to go into a plan B, because this is really like the best time, because they're focused on the budget at this point. So I'm just wanting to make sure, in any legal sense, if that needs to be our plan B, and if one of us wants to do that, can we do that?
No, thank you for bringing that up. And let me look into that for you as a plan B. It doesn't, hopefully that it's not a starting point for us. Hopefully we will, y'all will get some traction with the manager. I don't think that per se is prohibited as an individual citizen, but again, you also have to be very careful. For example, if 6 of you got the idea, we're all going to go to this board meeting, this council meeting as individual speakers. Well, technically, even though 6 of you are there as individuals, you now constitute a majority of the board, and that transforms it into a meeting of CTAC. So again, I think you have to be very careful and cautious in that. But I don't want to say either way, but I'm happy to look into that and try to provide y'all some guidance going forward.
I really appreciate that, Jill, because I'm gonna be really honest. I've sat in a lot of the meetings when they used to convene and everything in person, and that was really the way people got attention about certain things. And it's very unfortunate, but if you don't get on that docket, sometimes they won't even see your information, and it kind of forces them, when you get on the docket, because you have to provide information, it kind of forces them to read over your presentation. It forces them to see that, and they get it before the meeting, and it can kind of get the juices flowing in their mind. But like you said, that would be a plan B situation, but I just like to have everything in order. And I would be fine to go by myself. I've done it before on another topic, but it's just that we're all really passionate, and I don't want people in the city to forget that if we don't have air to breathe, there you go, guys. That's kind of like step one. If there's no air, there's no good trees, and that's what we're known for, and that brings our city its affluence. I think that needs to be brought to the city's attention, because it honestly really is an issue, and it is something that money should be pushed. There should be more money allocated to it. So whatever we can do, I think what the board is basically trying to communicate is that we're willing to do whatever it's going to take to at least allow them to hear what we're sharing, because it's kind of like our duty, because all of us are very passionate about ensuring that these trees are here. Our city continues to be known for its trees. And then, we're just being decent human beings trying to ensure that there's quality air for us to breathe.
Yeah, and I agree. And can I add to that of saying, and excellent, saying plan B, but again, time being of the essence. And if the budgets, I would say, there isn't any reason that we can't do both at the same time. In other words, go ahead and get on the docket. I mean, unless there is some legal reason, and if, let's say, Kay gets on the docket or I get on it for a different reason at a different time, et cetera, or whomever, as long as it's one or two of us, as long as there's no, and is there a rule that there not be any reference to CTAC? Another, but so, okay, I'm getting the hallelujah, yes, no.
Well, hey, this is Karen. I know in the past when we've talked about, and not to jump in because Jill knows more, and I know she's going to look into all this, but, I know in the past we've had to be careful about, you as a private citizen may speak, but you can't speak for CTAC, especially in a forum that you're not authorized to do so under the ordinance. And we've even had that question come up when a council member wanted to speak in front of the Utilities Commission, and we had to say, the city attorney's office had to say, you may speak, but you are not representing the Charlotte City Council. So it's the same idea, at least at this point, as far as I understand it. But I'll let Jill do a deep dive on that. Does that make sense?
Right, it does, because like I said, it sounds like we don't have time on any of these issues to wait to see if we get a response and then go for Plan B, because again, they may have moved on, like talking about this budget. If that's up now, we need to speak now. CTAC, and it's just that we're, as a board, we're slower moving than an individual going to city council.
I wanted to touch on a couple comments in the chat. I saw one from Mary Jo, and she mentioned telling a story. I think that's a good point. I think it's a good idea. Any advisory narrative you send to the manager, telling a story, I think, could be very helpful. Not just quoting numbers and kind of a bulleted list. An outline is great, but telling that story, I think that's a good idea. Connecting to any type of sources, the master plan, the comprehensive plan, whatever. Also, Sarah's suggestion of a regularly sending a letter throughout the year. I don't know how many times you want to do it, but I think that's a good idea too, is to have some expectation for the board of when, basically having a plan of when you're going to have discussions on what you're going to advise the manager about, kind of getting a plan, deadlines together, stuff like that. That could be helpful for just basic organization. And lastly, Kim, when do you want if Natasha's collecting feedback, what type of timeline do you want folks to get it to her by?
I mean, I would think as soon as the information comes in, if we can send it, and I would say at least a week prior, because again, I think we really do want to be aggressive and proactive. And I'll still say with my aspiration of if we can address a topic and a recommendation per meeting, that would be ideal, but that will count on a lot of communication prior to. So whatever each board member's passion and perspective and knowledge and story is, please share it with Natasha so we can get this list and start working on it. And then maybe we just, as far as the order in which we address it, is just whoever has it prepared the first, and then at the meeting we look at it and say, yep, let's send this on or not.
Okay, so if anyone's going to send something to Natasha, 2 weeks from now is Tuesday, September 7th. Would that be a good date? That'd give you 2 weeks. Natasha could get that stuff, turn it around, get it to you and Charlie. And
perfect.
Does that work?
I think that works.
Okay.
And then
of course, there's always the ability, as kind of Jill suggested, the communication among the board in a way that's aligned with public meeting laws and all that stuff. That's always there, like as a option as well. I'm not saying Natasha's the only way, but if Natasha's going to be used as a resource, let's use the 7th as a kind of just like a timeline, a deadline to get stuff to her, and she'll get it back out to you, Kim and Charlie.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, good deal.
Yeah, that works. And Kay, you're asking all the right questions. Kim and I wanted to go straight to city council, by the way, as well as the city manager. And we're told one step at a time, young man. We can only go to the city manager. So we'll see. And we'll see what impact it has. And I think the gist of it is you've asked us to be an advisory board. We can't do our job. And by the way, Tim and Lori can't do their job either. You've got to do something different, and we'll see what impact we can have. And hopefully we can put in there. I'm a believer in action steps. So, request a call in 30 days, something like that, to talk through this. And we want to work with the city. We're not trying to be difficult, but we're just trying to point out something that's a weakness and try to have some conversation about it, as opposed to we'll take it under advisement and get back to you. I don't think that's what we want to hear. One thing, and Laurie, I don't know if you're still on the line, and we can do this later, but I mentioned this earlier. I'd love to have a little bit better comp information on planting, like that peer comparison that had numbers for DC. I don't know how many we spend, but if you've got anything, it may not be the same type of comparison that we just put up for the maintenance, but anything we can use to kind of reflect how that 900,000 compares to what we think would be adequate, that would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, I mean, I will say, I've talked to a lot of other cities within North Carolina, just to kind of see how they do their tree planting and, trees and who they use and if they do it in-house and contractors. But I'll have to look back through my notes. I don't know if I've ever specifically asked for, their budget per tree, but I can definitely kind of make some comparisons with some of the larger cities and comparable cities within North Carolina and get an idea.
I'll just jump in here really quick. Can you hear me? This is Sarah Gagne.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just in some of my writing, I actually came across a national report of spending. I can't remember if it's tree maintenance and or tree planting, but I can certainly send that. So a fairly recent citation, I think maybe from 2016 or something like that.
That's great. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
You can send that to Kim.
Yes.
Then Kim will have it. She can send it to me, and I think we're doing things properly. But
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
And this is Sarah Hart. I guess one concern I have that I could see an argument from the city manager saying, well, we have so many trees. That's why the per tree allotment is so low. So I don't know how you get over that argument if they don't want to increase, if their initiation is they don't really want to increase it. That could be an argument I could see. And to have an argument against that, I think would be helpful.
And I think I agree with you. I think I asked Tim that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim. I think the peer cities, weren't they similarly sized, similarly dense cities, if you will?
Yes, for the TCAP review, they were, but we didn't look specifically at that during TCAP. The master plan analysis that was on the screen a moment ago, that was done by a consultant, Davy Resource Group, which is the biggest urban forestry consultant in the world. And that data is somewhere in the appendix of the master plan. So we have that, and we could, I'll send a link out to the board as well, to that website, but also to that specific location of that data to kind of see exactly what was compared.
Okay. Because Sarah raised a good point, that'd be helpful. And then I noticed DC has an advisory group that I think the Sierra Club formed, and I've forgotten the name of it. It was written in that document, and I wonder if they might be a good resource as well. It was called, I can't remember. Anyway, I'll look it up. But they may have comp information on what other cities are spending for both tree maintenance or planting new trees. So Lloyd, when they say, how does 8,000 compare to what you're doing? When DC said they planted 8,000, I guess that was last year. Need to verify that.
Yeah, so we plant between 800 and 1,000 trees every year. Tim mentioned earlier, that 900,000 is not just to tree planting. There's other, I did a couple forest health projects, a couple studies with that money. So not all of that 900,000 goes directly to procuring and planting trees. It is other aspects as well. But the money that is dedicated solely to tree planting, we try to plant between 800 to 1,000 trees every year.
I apologize. Can someone repeat, of the young lady with the glasses, I can't remember her name, but can she repeat what that argument is so I can write that point down to see what I can do to try to, work through that?
Sure. So I was just saying that can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just saying that I think an argument, somebody who may not be very motivated to save the trees could argue, well, the number is so low per tree because we have so many trees. So it dilutes the amount of money we have per tree.
Got it. Okay, perfect. I've got some sources that I can work with. And I think a lot of it's going to be one day we're just going to have to really raise some money because there's, trees are so understudied. It's very unfortunate. But I don't know, maybe I'll have to be the one to find some investors and some folks to donate some money so we can get it done on a national level because the trees are important. And I mean, at least we're trying,
No, well, and I would vote too. The biggest thing is let's save what we have. We've got to plant for sure, but we're seeing these massive, healthy trees, and even on private property. Of course, that's one of my things too. Is I think that we do need to have some sort of, ordinances regarding private property. I mean, just like you would get a permit pulled to add a garage to your house, that there's certain height or a certain diameter of trees that they need to be evaluated by an arborist and evaluated whether those trees can come down, because it's great. I mean, the planting is fantastic. We've got to keep that up. But when you're looking at saplings that may take 10 to 30 years to get to the point where we have trees right now. And if you go by the UN environmental report code red, we don't have 10 to 20 to 30 years for those trees to come up and do what they're already doing. That's what seems so crazy. We've got bird in hand and we're not protecting it. And these trees are coming down and they keep going with the excuse of, well, they're aging out. Da, 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 da. No, they're not. I mean, some, yes, but anyway, I think that's another avenue to keep the balance. We've got to save these mature trees since they're considered the number one mitigator of climate change. I mean, gosh, you just go right now when we had this hot week this last week, go to a parking lot, even if they have trees there, and it is one of those heat islands, and then walk onto a property where there's trees. There's probably a 20-degree difference. No joke. But anyway, I could get pretty passionate about that argument on our mature.
You're right. And DC and Atlanta both have pretty good historic, heritage tree preservation ordinances. The topic for another day, but absolutely we should be doing.
Right.
And I know Tim and Laura agree with that too. So.
Right. All right. Well, I think any other, I want to hear from each and every board member. Anybody have any other comments? I think we have our work cut out for us until next time, or is there anything else we should cover? Anybody?
So Kim, we have 3 more items on the agenda.
Oh, sorry.
I don't have a lot for all of those, but I just wanted to touch base real quick on a couple of them if we were kind of moving on from the funding. Okay. So for under projects, tree ordinance guidelines and development, it's just a reminder. It's taking longer than I thought it would, but we being myself, Lori, and Henry will be bringing some guidelines to the board very soon. Tree ordinance guidelines. These are, again, the supplemental documents for the tree ordinance that kind of further explain and guide how certain development requirements should be followed and applied. They also can range into the more engagement educational realm as well and everything in between, but that's coming. And what I'm thinking for that is that we will give you enough lead time as we can. So multiple weeks we'll send out draft guidelines to the board with some context on how they apply and historical, I guess, just background information. And then at a future meeting, we'd want to hear your feedback and further explain. But the payment in lieu guideline certainly would be one of those. That'll probably be a little bit later because that's tied directly to the UDO. There are some things we need to get done now for the current tree ordinance. A couple of those are, I think Lori's been working on a utility standard that may come forward. We also have let's see, we have the urban site guideline and development standards we're working on that just further explains. A couple of years ago, there was a text amendment that said in urban locations, tree save now can be applied this way. We need additional guidelines and details to explain that to customers, how it works. City tree mitigation policy may be something that sees some edits in the future. But again, we'll be bringing multiple guidelines and details forward in the coming months. And I think that once it starts, it'll be a continual stream. I don't think we'll give you 20 at a time to review. It's probably going to be incremental, a couple here, a couple there. But going forward, the plan is to have everything ready to go for the UDO. But also in the short term, there's probably some urgent things we need for the current ordinance. So just FYI on that. Happy to take any questions right now on that. You've heard that a couple of times. That's not really new, but okay. Not seeing any questions. Item B under projects. Oh, I heard something.
Did Kay have a question? No. Oh,
no.
sorry. I thought.
I'm good. Thank you, Kim.
Oh no, her hand's still up, but no. The tree canopy action plan. I wanted to go over that again with the board. We sent an email out a couple weeks ago. The TCAP report and all the accompanying documents have been posted online. I'm trying to get back to my link here. 1 second. Okay. I'm going to bring it up for you in just a second here. I close it out. By mistake, of course. Bear with me 1 second. Whoa. So what I wanted to share, if I can, is it's out there now. I know some of you have reviewed it. You sent me some questions. I'm happy to talk about that however the board wants to. Where is it? Sorry, this is not how I wanted to roll this out. It's not, the link won't load for some reason. Try one more time. There we go. Okay. Apologies. You won't get those 3 minutes of your life back. I'm sorry. So here's the website with TCAP. If you scroll down, the resources are at the bottom. Ignore me, Lori, and Natasha's fancy videos there. I think we did a good job. But none of us are going to be Hollywood anytime soon. Okay, here we are at the bottom. That's hundreds of pages worth of data and information there. So happy to go over it if and when you want to. That information in the final report was all summarized and built off of these supporting documents, stakeholder advisement, public engagement, the master plan, staff expertise, et cetera. And a lot of it got into the comprehensive plan, and more of it's going to get into the UDO. It's not all go in the UDO because the UDO is regulatory, so there's non-regulatory stuff as well. But anyway, it's there, and just wanted to FYI, make sure that the board saw that. If you click on it, it should bring the report up. And there we go. You can click through it. It is interactive. Let's see here. Yeah. It's got place type data. Trying to get to one section here for a segue. Okay, so this is a really important one. I highlighted strange, but decrease the acreage of tree canopy loss on residential property, maintain a high level of citywide tree canopy across all neighborhoods. That's high level policy that's going to support recommendations in the comprehensive plan and the UDO to start targeting residential infill development for tree preservation and planting. So that's a really big step. And I'm talking to my leadership to kind of get a better sense of when I can kind of provide more detail on what's going to be in the UDO, what's in the UDO. Right now, there's typically an approach that says city council needs to be briefed first before advisory boards like the planning committee, stormwater advisory committee, the tree commission are briefed in detail. But I can tell you to some level of detail, a heritage tree program is intended to be proposed, and targeting preservation and planting on infill development. That's something that's going to be proposed as well. Right now, I'm not going to go into more detail than that, but there's a lot of stuff in TCAP, and it may not read in a way it's like, okay, wow, that's a big step, but a lot of it is. The funding thing is a big step as well, but a lot of the regulatory stuff is very big as well. So anyway, just FYI on that. And that was supposed to be a better segue into the UDO and preservation policy. I know there's been discussion recently about supporting or advising on stronger preservation requirements. And I'm happy to visit that in the future, Kim. Whenever you and the board want to, we can talk about it now. But the draft UDO is intended to be released in October, to give you kind of an expectation of the timeline of when that information will be out there for the public. My goal is to talk through some of the more detailed concepts before then. We did go over the higher level concepts that the UDO's Ordinance Advisory Committee saw in May. But again, that was high level concepts, kind of comp plan level stuff. The actual requirement, the black and white, the developers are going to have to follow. That's going to be going live in October.
When you say going live, I mean, as far as it's going to become the ordinances, or it's going to go live for everybody to look at and comment on?
The latter, yeah, it's going to go live for public review.
Okay.
It's not intended to be voted on until next spring, assuming that everything goes well. It's going to be very like the comprehensive plan. It's going to be very. It's going to be a high profile, probably contentious. It's going to impact developers' bottom lines. So there's going to be a lot of back and forth, but it'll be out there for months for public review and public comment and engagement. There's going to be a very big engagement effort, meetings, events, presentations. So it'll learn from the process that the comprehensive plan went through. And right now, the proposed timeline is city council vote next spring, implementation, or maybe in the summer, implementation in the fall of 2022. That's when the ordinance requirements, as however they're adopted by council, would be implemented.
Okay, so we definitely would want to hear about it, or is it one of those things that we wait till it's presented then, and so that you don't, I don't know what's the most efficient way of looking at it and
my view, and I've talked to some folks about this recently, like my view is, especially if this board's going to be advising on tree canopy policy, then I think Mary Jo had a comment in the chat, like you need to be aware of certain things that are out there or coming. For example, the budget talk, certainly highest priority is better supporting maintenance and those types of programs, but certain regulations will be proposed. If they're adopted, it's going to require significant additional staff to enforce. So that could be something that would be very valuable for, your budget, advice for the city manager.
So should we move this up to a discussion? I mean, I don't know if it's something we want to discuss today, or should we move it up for discussion for next meeting so that we are sure to include that in our recommendation, or?
I would suggest next meeting, just so I can get a better understanding from my leadership on, what UDO, policy I can share.
Okay.
There's definitely an interest in not getting too far out in front of council. So there's a goal to brief them. And next week, I know at a subcommittee meeting, they're going to be briefed on some changes, not just from the tree ordinance, but other UDO articles, subdivision, streets, infrastructure, stormwater, zoning, trees. It's gonna be a very general brief though. So, so I'm confident we can start talking about it in greater detail soon. I'm just not sure exactly when that is. But I would stick with the kind of current plan you have for the funding work. That makes sense. And let's get some momentum going.
Right. Okay. Very good.
That's my thoughts.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
All right. Anybody else? Thoughts, comments? I guess, shall we make a move for adjournment, or?
Somebody's got to, other than Kim.
Other than me.
I motion to end the meeting.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Welch. And we got to vote.
Thanks. Thanks.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Davis.
Yay.
Gagne.
Yay.
Hart.
Yay.
Holmes.
Yay.
Negrin.
Yay.
Steve left us early. McGowan.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yay.
And Welch.
Yay.
Motion carries.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. I'm excited.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim and Charlie.
We all have homework.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right. All right. Bye.
Bye.